Hi, everyone.
All right, I have started recording. I have 4:02 and I'll call the meeting to order. Oh yeah, I've got to say this remote participation via Zoom is pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order regarding open meeting laws. Mary could have said it better, but that's what we got. All right. Do we need a roll call?
Yeah, it might be a good idea.
All right, I'm here. Lee,
Here,
Marcia,
Here.
Mary Ann,
Here.
Mickey.
Here.
Okay, and that's all we got. So Liz and Reagan. I got an email from Reagan the last when I looked. She won't make it. So
Yeah.
that's 5, 6, 7.
Mary
8.
Longacre says that she's at work and cannot attend.
Right. We're still missing somebody though. I think
Allison King.
that's it.
And Liz Almodovar too.
Right.
Yeah,
Liz
no,
won't be here for a little bit. So
Okay.
all right. No Liz, no Reagan or Allison. But we'll start. All right, we have a quorum. Anybody want to discuss the agenda? Any changes they want to make?
Henry, I'll point out that we've got some information about the survey. So under item 5 as a subhead, we might discuss survey.
That works for me. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Any more discussion? No? Okay, good. Agenda's approved. Could I have a motion for the draft minutes from March 1st?
I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Is there a second?
Second.
Mickey seconds. All in favor, aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes. Very good. Lee, you want to discuss the survey? Start.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm just, I write notes as I go. I was able to meet with Andrew Vorse last week, no, earlier this week, it was Monday, and said that there had been a general request from members of the work group that our initial approach to the public was through a survey. And he thought it was a good idea. But he did say, I said to him, well, we're going to need some money. And he did say, how much? I may have a little surplus this spring, but at which point Henry offered up the fact that the town association did a survey for, Henry, I'm going to say approximately $880.
Yes. And Andrew did give me an approval when I emailed him, so.
Our earlier discussion, Henry, of the survey was that each subgroup would submit a question or 2, or even 3. And so I think, let me propose to the group and then we can concur or amend that it be up to 2 questions of substance and a 3rd question which would read and be open-ended. And is there anything else that you would like to add into this subject area? Does that make sense? Let me give you an example from circulation. Do you approve of paid parking? No, yes. And the question, the survey would have it blocked out into, let's say, 7 grades from one equal absolutely no to 7 equal absolutely yes. It's called a Likert scale. I always like odd numbers so that there's a midpoint. Number 4 would be neither yes nor no. So that's an example of a question of substance. Another example might be, do you agree that a car should be allowed to park on sidewalks on certain narrow streets? Yes or no? And then the third question would be, within the elements of circulation, is there anything else you'd like to contribute? That's what I'm suggesting to offer up. And Henry, given the way we're set up here, first of all, we're going to discuss this. And second of all, I'll write the minutes in such a way that there will be a demand from each subgroup for a written on their questions. I don't think we should do it here unless people already have already thought it out and have some. So that's my report, Henry.
Lee, Reagan and I, in our group, which is number 7, services and facilities, we did put together more than 3 questions for this, potential survey. So, I assume every section will do their own set of questions, and then maybe we could review them all together at the appropriate time. It's hard to come up with just 3 because, at least in our area, we had parking. I had a couple of questions on parking, something about lighting, noise, and businesses in town. So they were kind of hard to eliminate, narrow it down to 2 or 3, but I guess we could.
I'm open to suggestions on size. I will comment on that in a moment. However, when we assemble the survey, if we have repetition among the groups, for example, parking, we can sort that out so that there's only one question in the survey on parking rather than duplicating it. So that's one way of dealing with it. I go back to my first effort as a teacher to get feedback from students. It was long before there was something called student evaluations. And so on the final exam, I said to the students, do not put your name on this page. I'm going to tear it off, but answer 3 questions. What did you like most about the course? What did you like least about the course? And how do you suggest that we improve it? And out of that, I was appointed to Penn State's subcommittee on creating student evaluations, and been looking at surveys ever since. And I'm very cautious because I've been subjected to surveys that don't ask the real question. They ask leading questions. Surveys need to be validated. Anything we do will be submitted to MPEDC for their review. And I think, Henry, you may want to comment on what happened to the Town Association survey on hot tubs and spas. And then we'll come back to numbers, Mickey. I don't mean to cut you off.
Right. There's nothing wrong with if each group comes up with 4 or 5, as long as we whittle it down in the final review. When the Town Association started the survey, we had, I believe, 24 or 28 questions. And that's the first thing that planning told us is you've got to keep this short. So we took it down to 18, which seemed to work. In other words, with a lengthy survey, you're probably going to lose interest in who's ever taking it. But to start out with, even if we've got 30 questions total, we can work it down. And Lee, you're right, there probably will be some repetition, depending on, what the category is.
Okay.
I'd like to make a suggestion.
Henry, Mary Ann's got her hand up, but I did say I was going to respond to Mickey and then it'd be Mary Ann's turn. But I'm not chair. Henry's chairing this meeting. Mickey, I hear you, and I think I'm going to phrase the minutes for each subgroup to pose important questions with the idea that the entire work group will review and assemble and submit to MPEDC, as long as we understand that our bosses may whittle it down.
Yeah, I can see that there would be some overlap, especially parking and things like that. So I can see that some of these will get naturally whittled down.
Yeah. Okay, Henry, I'm
Yeah,
done.
Mary Ann, go ahead.
I just like to make a process suggestion for everybody to weigh in on. I would suggest one person take on well, first of all of us submit our questions to one person, and that one person come up with a draft questionnaire, because I think our questions may be all over the place, but rather than all of us looking at all the questions, it would be better, I think, if one person kind of comes up with a draft of the questionnaire, and then we all weigh in on that draft, just to smooth the process over, not make it completely overwhelming. And now that we know that Lee is the master of this.
No way. Mary Ann, I was going to volunteer to be the point person, and then I was going to turn to our chair and say, Henry, you've got experience direct with MPEDC.
I thought Mary Ann was going to volunteer.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I have great respect for a really good survey, but I do have the experience where a lot of surveys annoy me greatly because, the options they give me for answers may not be there, and there's no place for a different answer than but it's just to say that I have a lot of respect for it, and I feel like I completely support what Mary Ann's suggestion for a process. But I also wonder if we could add a step or two before we launch into it, because whether Lee or, all of us could put together a set of guidelines for how do you properly frame a question? And also, what is our goal? Are we choosing the aspects of our individual work that we find to be potentially controversial? Are we choosing things that where we need to find support to present before the boss as to something that we feel strongly needs to be in the master area plan? Like what is our goal in this? Because I know we all want to have more input, but I think I get worried too when I hear some of the questions about, I'd like to know somebody answering the question, do they live in the town and they're weighing in on parking, or do they not live in the town? Because I think your experience would be, your take on it would be quite different if you live in town and you walk the sidewalks and you can't walk down the street because people are parked on them. Or, I just, so there are things like that, which I just think, who's answering the question? It colors the answer and how valuable that.
Marcia, that's an extremely important point. So important that Henry and I forgot to mention that the town association survey on hot tubs and spas the invitation was sent by postcard to specific addresses. And then there was a code number on the card that had to be entered so that we could tell who was responding. I did mention to Andrew Vorse, there's always the possibility of just putting a little legal notice in the INM and seeing who responds. And he said, absolutely not.
Oh,
He likes the idea of an invitation to people who live within the area.
it also went out on Daybreak Nantucket, did it not?
It did, and we had it on the town website. But unless you have the code on the card, well, one of the questions is, where do you live?
Yeah,
And we verified, we had, well, it's interesting. We had one person fill it out 3 times, all the same answers. Whether they forgot they filled it out, I have no idea, but that got chopped down to just one. We had people outside of the historic district that said they lived inside, and we had people that were inside and said they lived outside.
oh.
But it's, if you remember, I can print it up. The way the questions are in there, we know where people live, whether they're on island, off island, rent. That was figured in there. At the town association meeting Tuesday, hopefully we'll have time and we can kind of get in this and show the results.
Who wrote that survey? I was wondering, did you guys write it?
We actually kind of ripped off the planning department from, was it 2007, Marianne?
Yeah, I don't remember the
I think it
date.
was. Anyway, and then we changed things around to fit more what we were doing. But it was Marianne, Hillary, and myself. And as far as the computer work, I'll give Hillary full credit because I knew nothing about, other than, what or where we live and who should be responding. But we had a lot of responses from outside of the Sconset and the town historic districts, but that's all figured in.
Great.
Yep. Show up Tuesday and I'll show you.
Okay, good.
We're still filtering, but I didn't see where anybody, any particular group tried to, I won't say cheat, but change the results. I suppose could have been some instances, but I just didn't see it. We put out, I believe it was 1,500 postcards, and we got back, what was it, 450, Marianne?
Mm.
You remember?
Yeah, just shy of 500.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it was 480. And for this time of year, that's not bad. It's tough to do a survey this time of year because most everybody is gone. And the post office is not great about forwarding postcards. We had put first class postage on all of them, and it did not really make a difference. I spot checked by calling neighbors who were, off island for the winter. Nobody I talked to got the postcard. One is back. I didn't check with them to see if it was still here, but I don't think the postcard or the post office forwarded many of the cards. And I don't know what we can do about that.
Well, I think we should do the survey sometime in the summer. That would be ideal.
Yeah, in the tub spa, I think it should have been done last fall before the article was even proposed. But
Right. But with ours, just for us to capture as many people as possible, we should try to do the survey this summer.
yeah, well, we figured that out from the membership drives, just from the responses. By the time May comes around, everybody showed up, and I just think we do better. But the way we're going, it's going to take us till May to get this survey set anyway.
Henry, in response to Marcia's earlier question, I will try and make a statement about how to pose a question. But typically it would be people in the town area are concerned about parking. In whatever form it takes, are you in favor of paid parking or not in favor? And then the Likert scale one through 7. So a little short statement about why it's a question, and then your opinion. Another example might be that there have been proposals to rationalize the intersections at Five Corners and at School Hospital, which would be Prospect, Atlantic Avenue, Sparks, and Surfside Road. You want it to stay the same, or would you be in favor of some kind of rationalization? By the way, it was typically a roundabout. But just to confuse things, there have been proposals to make a one-way street system in place of a roundabout. Williams, Atlantic, Pleasant. Williams Park, Atlantic, Pleasant. And don't ask me how the trucks would maneuver.
You're reading my mind. All right. Would it help if I dug out that Tub Spa survey so people could see? I don't know how much you remember, but you could see how the questions were phrased and the answers. Does that make sense? Or
Henry, if you want to send it to me, I'll do it as an attachment to the minutes.
yep, I'm pretty sure I saved it.
You know, in the instance of the spa, it's going before the town meeting. So I would suspect that in this given survey, we have some brief description because people aren't going to know that we're working on an area plan or what that is.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, there's got to be some kind of introduction as to, you know, what's going on and why for us.
So is this considered doing the survey? I remember a reference to the group in Sconset doing a survey. I'm just curious to know, is it considered a typical aspect of putting together an area plan?
From what I gathered, and most of this came from what happened out in Matticat, if you're considering especially zoning changes, you need to have research on it and be able to back it up. So in other words, we can think it's a great idea. Nobody parks on sidewalks, you know, all streets are one way. But if that's what goes in on zoning, there could be a revolution.
So again, that suggests to me that the questions we choose are the ones that need that kind of legal support.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much review, and I'm sure there's going to be extensive review from planning once we send this in.
Yeah, Henry, I would agree. I think it's important, but I don't think we should worry about it now because I think planning will look very carefully at what we're asking.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
Adjournment?
Wow, not even 4:30 yet.
Okay, Henry, I was thinking, but I think I'm premature. I was thinking that subgroups might start to consider what their draft statement would look like. And I got to retract that because I think we need to get the survey done first. I mean, there are many routes to public participation, but what I'm gathering is that the survey is a good start. What do I mean by many routes? We could have written a white paper, a so-called something horse, and then toss that out for the public to comment on, held some open meetings and so forth. I think this survey is maybe statistically more valid. But once we get the results of it, we are going to have to come to grips with what we write as a draft plan.
No, I agree. All right.
And does that, it doesn't really lessen the efforts that any of our groups may make to meet with other related groups? You
Okay,
know,
I'm going to become emphatic. Absolutely not. The more input that we can get, the better. However, if you do meet, please, in whatever shorthanded way you do, document it so that when the report's made, we can toss the event into the minutes at the time it's reported on.
well, I mean, we did, you know, with working with Liz, and our work was on natural and cultural resources. And Liz and I met with Jesse Bell of the Land Bank. We also met with Michael Harrison, curator of NHA. And, you know, at the time that was not, I mean, I thought everybody understood, and that was discussed, and it was encouraged to get other feedback from specific relevant
Whatever notes you supplied at the time are in the minutes. So whether we specified the person or the person's office, I know that's in the minutes.
Okay, but my bigger question was that we're seeking feedback. So that's what we're talking about when we're doing a survey, is we're talking about seeking feedback from the greater public at large, or from specific related interests or people that know a lot more. Like Nikki and I were going to go and meet with some of the housing organizations just to see if we're kind of, you know, addressing issues in the same way, or, you know, that because we're not in the trenches as they are.
Okay, so once again, to be emphatic, by all means, do so. And just however you inform the total work group, just give us a brief indication of who it was with whom you met.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, the more information, the better. The survey, I hadn't really thought about that as far as going to businesses. With tub spas, we did property owners and renters. What we could figure out, and I would assume we'd be doing the same with this. We don't necessarily have to. I don't know how many businesses are in the old historic district.
Well, Henry, I think Mary was going to come up with a list of businesses that are actually within the area that we're talking about here. So she
Yes.
just hadn't received that list yet. So
Yes.
Okay.
that should be useful when we have the list.
My memory is that contact was made with the chamber and the chamber was going to give a
Right.
list.
Right, okay.
Right.
And to add to that, because many of our artists and artist studios may not be members of the chamber, we're going to get the same listing from Artists Association of Nantucket.
That rings a bell.
Right. And I also thought that there was going to be a list, a much shorter list of the properties that have been businesses in the past, and that we were trying to encourage that we retain kind of the grandfathering of that zoning for those businesses that may not.
Yes, we did. We did. I live out here on New Street, which is in the old historic district. It was residential commercial when we bought our house. And it's quite possible that Murray's Warehouse may disappear as one more neighborhood convenience store, in this case clothing, that will disappear into housing. I chatted with Bert Ryder. I said, Bert, where was Ryder's package store? He, the number escapes me, but I think it was 47 Orange Street. I said, I went in there once, and then they closed. Nantucket Bake Shop, now Flock, but there were a few other convenience stores around about 60 or 65 Orange Street. They're all gone. Nat Lowell jokes with me when I tell him that my kids couldn't pronounce Rabimbus. Became Fay and Flaherty, or Flaherty, and is now a private home on Pleasant Street.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I do think, I mean, I know we've all discussed it, but I agree. I think it's really an important aspect that could disappear. And at the same hand, in other new design developments around in the country, they're encouraging it. Whereas we're just kind of on the, losing it.
So my daughter has an apartment at the edge of Greenwich Village, and the supreme writer about healthy cities, Jane Jacobs, lived in Greenwich Village and used it as the model of what works, because the restaurants and the shops and so forth kept people on the street,
Yes.
not only during the working hours, but afterwards as well. And then people lived up above.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I think I've got some notes that I can craft into minutes, and your edits and submissions are always welcome. Henry, what else?
I will dig out the Tub Spa survey and send it to you, Lee, so you can include it, and that way everybody can
Okay.
at least get a general idea.
Yeah.
And what shall we do with our questions?
I was going to send mine to you.
I was going to be specific. Send questions to me, and I will assemble them in a fashion that Henry can edit.
And you can provide us before that with any particular guidelines that
Yes, yes.
Great.
Yeah. Let's see. Sometime earlier, you asked, how should we phrase a question? Lee writes Likert scale and will draft instructions.
Okay, great.
That works.
I have
Anybody have anything else?
I do have one simple thought just to share for you to think about, that kind of not related to today's agenda, but probably to the pools and spas. And it's something I think that Mickey Rowland and I doing design work are more aware of, but you might have experienced it, because to me, as I walk downtown and I'm aware with certain restoration renovation projects, there's an aspect that to me can be as invasive or kind of jarring as a spa or a pool, and that is where the back of the house gets approval for essentially what's a large deck area that's way above ground. And it creates constructed on a second level roof of a kitchen, which was Vladimir Kagan's house. And whenever you do that up on a second level, or in some of the houses that have a super high basement, almost a full first story as a basement, you create an environment where people are on a deck. It's a large area. It's a gathering outdoor space that essentially is higher than your neighbors. You're looking over a neighboring outdoor space, private space for people. And it creates very similar to, I think, a spa or a pool in a backyard, because you're creating a large outdoor deck area, and you can see it around in a number of spaces on new projects particularly. I don't know, Mickey, maybe you're aware of it more with your review of HSAB.
Yeah, I mean, I think one in particular is coming up on India Street, although I'm not sure that it's an elevated deck, so to speak. I think they're lowering their sunroom in the back to get it closer to grade. So that's probably a better approach than what you're referring to.
Right.
I'm going to say that I think this may be a very important topic, but we need to consider that it's addressed in zoning and in the use chart. And one approach may be for the subgroup that's working on housing to recommend a change to both the use chart. In other words, do decks count, particularly if they're not in the building profile, but external on their own support? Does this count as ground cover? And if it's high enough, et cetera, in terms of building height, and whether or not we propose that there be a change. Because I think that would be a legitimate issue to go into both the questions and your draft of what you think goes into the work plan, local area plan.
Good. Great.
Because I'm on land use, that sounds very complicated to me, since I'm not a professional in this area. But I would have to say that the problems created in the densely packed downtown, a lot of them have to do with noise. So it's not just decks, it's everything else that creates and amplifies noise.
Mhm.
And there's kind of no end to the things that create this problem. It's just that when you're designing any addition to, or change to a downtown densely packed neighborhood, noise, the noise implication should be taken into account. And it isn't right now.
Right.
So
Yes.
we have a problem because there is a noise ordinance that's fairly strict and has just recently been revised. But the town does not separately fund a noise enforcement officer. They depend upon complaints to the police department. And that doesn't work very well. Henry's in town and can report on that ad nauseum.
I mean, I think that it's absolutely, I agree with Marianne, and I think that you probably have seen that I wrote at length about this kind of an issue on my survey for the pools and spas, because my feeling is that that the feeling is, which is why we're even doing this, because when Leslie Snell and Andrew Vorse came to one of our meetings probably 2 years ago and said they were working on a master plan, and we learned that there was no area master plan for the downtown. And Andrew and Leslie felt that we had plenty of protection because it's a historic district. And my feeling in thinking about the noise issue and these affronts to living downtown, is that the historic district legislation was put through in the late 50s, and it was a visual architectural thing to preserve the structures, to preserve what we have. It was in no way addressing what has come to be in our everyday lives for another level of protection. And so if you pull out that survey, and I know I copied what I wrote, but my feeling is to try to take a look, in a broader way about the issue of noise and other issues where there is no protection. A noise ordinance about times of day, I don't think is covering us. It's not covering a protection of what's a really fragile environment, and it's not just about a visual and about the architecture.
No,
So how would we incorporate this into our plan? What section does noise fall into?
All of them.
I would say housing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Mickey, that's Mickey and myself.
Okay. I had an extremely interesting project back in 1972, which involved taking sound pressure level meters underground into coal mines. All of which is very interesting and will not be related here because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But I learned a lot about noise. The official definition is unwanted sound. And then there were issues of perception versus value. People were complaining about a local airport, and they were complaining loudly about planes like the Cessna 402s. It turns out that under a sound pressure level meter, they were quieter than the jets, but the jet noise didn't last as long. They took off and disappeared, whereas the propeller planes droned on and on and on. We also learned as a presentation that if you take two equal neighborhoods, one against an interstate and one against a forest, the property values tell you something about the noise levels. And so, yeah, a lot of this has been studied, but how it gets converted into regulation and enforcement is still, for us on Nantucket, the issue.
Well, I think what I'm curious about, and I'll try to figure something out, but my feeling is that we're aware that there are dense urban new towns being designed and built in the country. And I find it curious that they tend to look toward, Andreas Duani tends to look toward Nantucket for a lot of those wonderful aspects of how to do a new town. And my sense is maybe it's time for us, which of course in this case is Mickey and myself, to take a look at what do those new towns in the country,
Yeah.
how do they must have it embedded in their design to deal with.
But if Marcia, if we take Nantucket, then we do have some new town developments, Woodbury and North Shop and Nashua-Quisset. And I don't think any of them have property or lot sizes equal to mine, which is 3,200 square feet. Until, we are very close to our neighbors, at which point even just modest noise levels above conversation could become annoying. Luckily, I've got good neighbors, but not everybody on Nantucket does. So lot size has a lot to do with it.
It does, and I would just like to see what is established for noise, for these regulations in, I mean, a whole new town, a totally new town elsewhere in the country.
I have no idea.
No, I think it's a bit of research just to see how do they address what I kind of lump into a category of quality of life.
We have to identify what kind of noises we're referring to also, because there's, people noise, which is, just partying and loud conversation. And there's the landscapers, there's traffic noise,
Mhm.
probably, airplane noise, probably others I'm not even thinking about, but, some can be kind of controlled and others are just, I don't know what you do. You can't build sound barriers.
Right. Well, I think things like, a helicopter, it's like Lee had said, that's a really different long-term lingering sound. It takes a long time for them to land and then a longer time for them to leave.
But they go over my house all the time. And I look at Priscilla and she looks at me and she says, well, thank heavens somebody else is getting good medical care.
Well, I think that's a good thing, but I'm not sure it works for everybody. And I think, everybody putting in air conditioning systems and outdoor condensers, it's a noise level. So anyway. Mhm.
Okay,
Anything else? All right, motion to adjourn?
you don't need that. We all agree.
Unanimous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I have 4:48, Lee.
All right, me too.
Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
See ya.
I'll try and get this out to you by Monday.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Henry, you can close the recording.
I am, if I can find the right button.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.